Hi, I'm in a situation I never thought I'd be in, and I don't know what to do. My wife Stephanie and I have been together for almost 10 years. We met in college, and at the time, she was everything I could have asked for. Smart, funny, ambitious, and more. We got married right after college. For a long time, I thought we had a good thing going. But lately, things have been strange. At first, I wasn't sure why, but Stephanie started acting distant. She wasn't as interested in spending time with me. I tried to talk to her about it, but she shut me down or got defensive. I thought maybe she was stressed about work, but I never imagined it could be anything more serious. Looking back, I was just naive. Looking back, I should have seen the signs sooner. For example, Stephanie started staying late at work more often, always with some excuse about a big project or a tight deadline. I didn't think much of it at first because she's always been career-oriented, and I didn't want to seem like one of those controlling husbands. But then she started canceling plans we had made weeks in advance, dinners, weekend trips, even our anniversary dinner. She'd say she was too tired or that something unexpected came up, but she never offered a real explanation. When I asked her about it, she got upset and said I was overreacting.
This is your story channel. If you haven't subscribed yet, please join us to stay updated with more real stories happening around you.
She got upset and said I was overreacting. I remember one night she came home late and when I tried to kiss her, she pulled away. It was as if she couldn't stand to be around me. Then there was her phone. Stephanie used to be pretty open about her phone, leaving it around the house or on the nightstand. But recently, she started carrying it around with her all the time, even taking it to the bathroom. When I asked her why she was being so secretive, she laughed and said I was being paranoid. She said she was just trying to keep track of work emails, but something about the way she said it didn't seem right. I wanted to believe her, but I had a bad feeling. Something was wrong. Deep down, I think I already knew what it was, even if I wasn't ready to admit it to myself. The moment I realized something was wrong happened at a party we went to last weekend. It was supposed to be a fun night, just a gathering at a friend's house, with lots of drinks and good company. My business partner, Mark, was there too. We'd worked together for years, and I trusted him completely. He was one of the last people I would ever suspect of doing something like that. But as the night went on, I started to notice something. Stephanie had been unusually excited to come to the party, which was strange because she hadn't wanted to go to social events lately. At first, I thought maybe she was trying to make an effort for us. But as soon as we arrived, she practically disappeared into the crowd. I didn't think much of it at first. I was with some friends, having a few drinks, and trying to have a good time. But after a while, I noticed that she was gone for a suspiciously long time. I started looking around, thinking she was just chatting with someone. That's when I saw her with Mark. They were in a corner of the backyard, hidden from everyone else, and they were standing so close and whispering to each other that it just didn't look right. My heart dropped, but I told myself it was just my imagination. But then I saw her laughing the way she used to laugh with me and touching his arm. Mark leaned closer, and his face didn't look friendly. It was the look of a man who knew exactly what he was doing. I felt like I was suddenly losing everything. I wanted to rush over and demand to know what was going on, but I couldn't move. My mind raced. I imagined every possible negative situation. Without saying a word, I turned and walked straight out of the party. I had to get away from there before I did something I'd regret. As I left, I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't going to let them get away with this. I spent the whole night pacing around our living room, barely able to think straight. I couldn't believe what I had just witnessed. My wife and business partner. I felt so betrayed. As I started to calm down, I felt angry. I wasn't going to let them ruin my life. They thought they were clever, sneaking around behind my back, but they had no idea who they were messing with. I started thinking of everything I could do to make them pay. I knew I had to act fast before Stephanie found out because we had a joint bank account. I logged into our accounts and transferred as much money as I could into a separate account she didn't know about. We also had investments together, including stocks, bonds, and real estate. I started taking steps to get rid of as much as I could, so she wouldn't suspect anything. I knew Mark was more of a challenge. We had contracts and legal obligations tied up in our business. But I also knew things about him like shady deals and questionable clients. If these things came to light, they could ruin his reputation and career. I wasn't just going to expose their affair. I was going to destroy everything they had built, everything they thought was safe. The next day, I called a lawyer I trusted and explained the situation to him. I didn't leave out any details. We started creating documents to protect my interests, to make sure Stephanie couldn't touch anything I didn't want her to have. I also set up a meeting with a private investigator. If they were that bold at a party, I could only imagine what else they'd been doing behind my back. I wanted solid proof to use against them. When I was done, I felt a sense of grim satisfaction. They may have taken me by surprise, but I wasn't going to let them get away with it. They thought they were smart, but I was already 10 steps ahead. And best of all, they had no idea what was coming next. When Stephanie came home that night, I was waiting for her. She walked through the door like nothing had happened, like she hadn't just been flirting with my business partner a few hours earlier. I wanted to lose my cool, but I kept my composure. I was curious to see how far she would go with her lies. She said, casually dropping her purse on the counter, "How was your night?" I felt angry, but I smiled. It was okay. "And what about you?" She shrugged and walked to the fridge. Acting like this was the most normal conversation in the world. It was the same old story. This party was pretty boring, to be honest. Boring. That's what she called it. I felt angry, but I tried not to show it. She called it boring. "You and Mark seemed to be having fun." Her hand froze on the refrigerator door. She didn't turn around, but I could see the tension in her shoulders. "What do you mean?" she asked. Her voice was a little too calm. I said, "I saw you two in the backyard. You were all cozy and whispering to each other like teenagers. Can you explain?" She finally turned to me, her expression neutral. "You're being ridiculous, Dan. We were just talking business. Mark always talks about work, even at a party." "Business," I said. "Is that what you call it?" Because it didn't look like business to me. It looked like you were all over him. Her eyes narrowed, and I could see her thinking, trying to figure out how to deal with this. "You're being paranoid," she said, her voice sharper now. "You know that Mark and I are friends. You're overreacting." I got rid of the last of my patience. "Do you think I'm one of them, Stephanie? Do you really think I haven't noticed how you've been acting lately? The late nights, the secret phone calls, ignoring our plans, and now this." She crossed her arms, her tone cold. "So now you're accusing me of cheating? You have no proof, Dan. You're just making things up because you're insecure." I was shocked by what I was hearing. She was trying to make me question what I had seen. But I wasn't going to let her turn this around on me. "I'm not the one making things up," I said, my voice deep and dangerous. "I'm going to find proof, Stephanie. I'm going to find out exactly what happened. And when I do, you're going to regret ever thinking you could get away with it." After our confrontation, the house felt like a war zone. Stephanie didn't try to talk to me again that night. She went straight to bed, leaving me alone with my thoughts. Couldn't sleep. I felt angry and betrayed. But I also felt a twisted sense of determination. She thought she could lie her way out of this, but I wasn't going to let her. The next few days were tense. We barely spoke. When we did talk, it was about things like work schedules, groceries, and the weather. Meanwhile, I was working on my plan. The private investigator Ed had hired was already digging into Stephanie's activities, and the lawyer was finalizing the paperwork to protect my assets. I kept it all a secret, pretending nothing had changed. But inside, I was furious. 2 days later, I got the first piece of evidence. The investigator had found text messages between Stephanie and Mark. They were exactly as I had expected. Flirtatious and intimate, way beyond anything that could be explained away as just friends. But the worst part was the way they talked about me. It was like they thought it was funny to sneak around behind my back. It made me sick to my stomach. I printed out the messages and left them on the kitchen table before Stephanie got home from work. When she walked through the door and saw them, her face went pale. I sat there waiting for her to say something, but she just stood there staring at the papers. Her mouth opened and closed as if she was looking for an excuse. "What is this?" she finally asked, her voice shaking. "Exactly what it looks like," I replied coldly. "Are you still going to tell me that I'm paranoid? Are you still going to say it's all in my head?" She swallowed hard, trying to calm down. I didn't mean for this to happen, Dan. It was just a mistake. I scoffed. You've been with him for who knows how long, and you expect me to believe it was just a mistake? Tears welled up in her eyes, but I wasn't moved. I knew what she was trying to do. She wanted to play the victim, make me feel sorry for her. But I wasn't going to fall for it this time. Dan, let's talk about this, she begged. We can work this out. This doesn't have to end like this. I stared at her, feeling nothing but contempt. You didn't care about fixing anything when you were sneaking around with Mark. You didn't care about this marriage or about me. Why should I care now? She took a step toward me, but I put up a hand to stop her. Don't, I warned her. Don't come near me. You made your choice, Stephanie. Now you'll have to deal with the results of your actions. After that night, things went from bad to worse between us. Stephanie tried to fix the situation. She started paying more attention, acting like the perfect wife. Cooking dinner, doing little favors, and trying to start conversations about our relationship. But it was all too little, too late. I saw through her act, and every attempt she made only made me more disgusted. I didn't need her fake kindness. I needed justice. Meanwhile, I continued with my plan. The private investigator had uncovered more evidence of her wrongdoing. Emails, texts, and receipts for hotel stays that coincided with those late nights at work she claimed. The more I found out, the angrier I got. They had tricked me and laughed at me behind my back. I wasn't going to let it go. Mark, on the other hand, was completely unaware of the problems coming his way. He continued to act as if everything was normal, as if he hadn't just destroyed our friendship and business partnership, but that I had something special planned for him. I knew every detail of our business. I knew all the secrets he thought were safely hidden. With the help of my lawyer, I started to take action. I cut all ties, moved money around, and gathered evidence that would destroy him if it ever got out. Then one morning, I made my move. I knew Stephanie was at work and Mark would be in his office. I walked in without warning, my lawyer with me, and handed him the marked-up documents ending our partnership. I also gave him a detailed list of all the times he had broken the contract, including some illegal activities he had done. His face went pale as he read the papers, realizing how serious things were. Dan, what is this? He stammered, his voice shaking. This, I said calmly, is me taking back control. You thought you could betray me and get away with it? Think again. Mark tried to reason with me, but it was too late. I had him trapped, and he knew it. As I left his office, I felt a rush of satisfaction, but I wasn't done yet. I made sure to leave a little something behind. An envelope with copies of the incriminating texts and emails, neatly labeled with Stephanie's name. In case he thought he could still have her. He was in for a nasty surprise that evening when Stephanie came home. I was waiting for her again, just like before. This time, I had more than just some printed texts. I had divorce papers, a detailed list of everything I knew about her affair, and a clear outline of what she stood to lose. As soon as she saw the papers on the table, her face crumpled. Dan, please, she said, but I cut her off. No more lies, Stephanie. No more games. I'm done. You're going to sign these papers and you're going to walk away with whatever I decide to give you. If you don't, I'm going to ruin you. I'm going to make sure that everyone knows exactly who you are and what you've done. She started crying. But I didn't care. I didn't care about her crying. This was about justice, about making sure she paid for what she'd done. As I watched her crumble, I felt nothing but cold satisfaction. The life she had built on lies was falling apart, and there was nothing she could do to stop it. The next few days were chaotic. Stephanie tried to plead with me, alternating between begging for forgiveness and threatening to make the divorce as messy as possible. But I wasn't affected by her emotional outbursts. I knew she was desperate to hold on to what she could, desperate to avoid the public humiliation that was coming. I told her that she could either sign the divorce papers quietly and get a small amount of money, or refuse and face total destruction. I wasn't bluffing, and she knew it. My lawyer had prepared everything to make sure she didn't get more than I was willing to give her. I had enough evidence of her cheating to make sure any court would rule in my favor. At first, she tried to call my bluff, saying she'd fight me for everything. But when I explained how I would expose her affair, not only to our friends and family, but to her employer as well, she changed her mind. She gave in. Stephanie worked in an important job where her reputation was very important. She knew that if the affair was exposed, it would ruin her career. Her threats turned to pleas. She promised to do whatever it took to make things right, including cutting all ties with Mark and going to therapy. But it was too late. I had lost all love for her, and in its place was a cold, unyielding determination. I told her, "You should have thought about that before you decided to betray me." Eventually, she realized she had no choice. After days of fighting, crying, and negotiating, she finally sat down at the kitchen table one evening and signed the divorce papers. Her hand shook as she did so. I could see defeat in her eyes. This was the same woman who had once said she loved me, and now she was reduced to a shadow of herself, knowing she had lost everything. But I wasn't done yet. I had one more trick up my sleeve. Mark. The business collapse was just the beginning. I made sure he got the envelope with all the evidence of their affair, just as I'd planned. I knew it would cause problems for him, and it did. The next day, Mark came to my door, upset and angry. He tried to say he was sorry, that it was all a mistake, that he still valued our partnership. But I could see the fear in his eyes. He knew that I could ruin his career and personal life. "Dan, please don't do this," he begged. "We can work this out." I stared at him, still angry. "Work something out? You think you can just forget about it? You cheated on me, Mark. You slept with my wife. There's no going back." He seemed to want to argue, but then he saw how determined I was and he gave up. "What do you want?" he asked, defeated. "I want you out of my life," I said, my voice cold. "You want to leave our business? You're going to take everything I give you and leave. And if I ever hear of you going near Stephanie again, I'll make sure everyone knows exactly what kind of man you are." Mark nodded, too scared to argue. I could see him realizing what was happening. He was losing everything he'd worked for because of his own arrogance and greed. He left without saying anything else, and I watched the man who used to be my partner walk away, his world falling apart just like Stephanie's. As I closed the door behind him, I felt a strange sense of calm. They thought they could betray me and get away with it. But now they knew better. Stephanie's life was in disarray. Mark's career was about to collapse. I was the only one with any power. They had no idea what was coming. For the first time since this nightmare began, I felt in control. I thought I would feel relieved and even victorious once Stephanie and Mark were out of my life. But then I realized what had happened, and it hit me harder than I expected. The house felt emptier and quieter, almost suffocating. Every room reminded me of what I'd lost. Not just a woman, but the life we'd built together and the future I thought we had. I knew she deserved everything that was coming to her, but the finality of it all was hard to accept. Within a week, Stephanie moved out. She didn't have much of a choice since the house was in my name and she couldn't afford to fight me for it. It was strange to watch her pack her things. She tried to reach out to me one last time, her voice soft and almost broken. "Dan, I'm sorry. I know it doesn't change anything, but I need you to know that when I looked at her, the woman I once loved more than anything, I felt nothing, just a hollow emptiness." "Sorry isn't enough," I said gently. "It never will be." She nodded, crying, but didn't say anything more. I watched her load the last of her things into her car and leave. As she drove away, I didn't feel the satisfaction I thought I would. I felt a deep, lingering sadness. News of the affair spread quickly. Within days, word of what had happened spread. Our mutual friends began to take sides, and it was clear who they blamed. Most of them cut all ties with Stephanie. Even those who tried to stay neutral couldn't hide their shock and disappointment. Her reputation suffered greatly, especially after she lost her job when her boss found out about the scandal. Her company didn't like having an employee get involved in something like that. Mark's life also fell apart. The evidence I provided was enough to end our business relationship, and his involvement in shady dealings didn't stay secret for long. He lost clients, contracts, and eventually his position in the company we had built together. I heard he was trying to survive on what was left of his savings, his reputation in tatters. Still, I felt a sense of loss. The nights were the hardest. I'd lie in bed and stare at the ceiling, thinking about every moment and wondering why I hadn't seen it coming. I kept asking myself if there was anything I could have done differently, if I'd been too focused on my work, too trusting, too blind. I worked harder, longer hours, and tried to distract myself from the emptiness that followed me everywhere. But it wasn't enough. I could ruin their lives, but I couldn't erase the memories or the pain of betrayal. I realized that even though I wanted revenge, it wouldn't give me the closure I wanted. One night, about a month after Stephanie left, I found myself at the old coffee shop where we used to go on Sunday mornings. I hadn't planned to go there. It just happened. I sat in the corner, staring out the window, thinking about how different things were now. Then I had a realization. Even though I'd won, I'd lost something. I lost Stephanie, but also a part of me. I lost the part that believed in love, trust, and the life we'd built together. In the end, I had to accept that I couldn't change what had happened. I couldn't undo the betrayal, the pain, or the aftermath. All I could do was pick up the pieces and move on. I wasn't sure what that would mean. Would I move to a new place? Meet new people? Or would I just have to figure out who I was without the outside influences? But I knew one thing. I wasn't going to let their betrayal define me. They had taken a lot from me, and it was time to take my life back, one step at a time. In the months that followed, I slowly began to rebuild my life. It wasn't easy, and some days were harder than others, but I knew I couldn't let the past hold me back any longer. Stephanie and Mark were just two people who made terrible choices. Their actions hurt me, but I was determined to move on. I decided to sell the house. It was full of memories and reminded me of what I lost. Instead, I moved to a smaller apartment across town. It wasn't fancy, but it was a fresh start in a space that was all mine. The new place felt different, quieter, but in a way that finally allowed me to breathe. There were no ghosts or broken promises there. I also reconnected with old friends from before Stephanie was in my life. They were there for me in ways I hadn't expected, offering support and a sense of normalcy when I needed it most. We started spending more time together, going out for drinks and playing games. We were living life without the weight of betrayal. I also started going to therapy regularly. I had never really been one to talk about my feelings, but I found it helped to have a place where I could unpack everything that had happened, where I could work through the anger, the sadness, and the self-doubt. It wasn't a quick fix, but over time it helped me see things more clearly. I understood that Stephanie's betrayal wasn't a reflection of my worth, but of her own failures. One of the biggest changes came when I decided to take a break from work. For years, I had been so focused on building my business and achieving success that I had neglected other parts of my life. After everything that happened, I realized I needed to find a better balance. I started exploring new hobbies that I'd always been interested in but never had time for, like photography, hiking, and learning to cook. These activities became more than just fun. They helped me rediscover who I was outside of my work and my failed marriage. Eventually, I started dating again, but I was careful. I wasn't looking for anything serious, just to meet new people and enjoy their company without any pressure. It was strange at first, but it was also refreshing to be with someone who didn't know all the baggage I carried. It made me realize that I still had a future and that my past didn't define me. Looking back, I realized that the experience, as painful as it was, had taught me a lot about myself. I learned that I was stronger than I thought, and that I could survive even the deepest betrayal. I learned the importance of setting boundaries and not letting anyone take advantage of my trust again. Most importantly, I learned that moving on isn't about forgetting the past, but accepting it, learning from it, and choosing to live for the future. If there's one piece of advice I'd give to anyone going through something similar, it's this. Don't let the betrayal define you. It's easy to get angry and hurt and want to get even, but that will only make things worse. These feelings will only hold you back. Focus on yourself, on healing, and on finding your own way forward. Life goes on after betrayal. It's just one chapter in a much larger story. You have the power to choose how to write the next part of your story.